Welcome to the 6 Miles to Supper podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Cox, and I've lost over 80 pounds with intermittent fasting 6 days a week, eating whatever I wanted at my meals, taking a cheat day every Sunday, and walking 6 miles a day. And I'm here to help you on your weight loss journey. Welcome to Season 5 of the 6 Miles to Supper podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to give you my story with intermittent fasting, the process of losing 80 pounds, the different struggles I've had when I was losing weight, and in maintenance in the years since getting down to my goal weight, what it's been like, and where I'm at today. And in this season on the podcast, I'm going to focus on intermittent fasting, the real practical aspects of it, how I do it, what my experiences have been with it, how that has changed over the course of time. And I love intermittent fasting, and I've done it for several years now, and I continue to do it. And that's why I do this podcast. That's why I make the YouTube videos I make, and it's why I've written the books about intermittent fasting that I have, which are available on Amazon and Audible. The link is in the show notes. So if you've listened to this podcast, or if you've watched my videos or read my books, you probably have heard at least some of the details of this story. But I thought it'd be a good idea to really go through the entire arc so you could get kind of the big picture overview of what my journey with intermittent fasting has looked like, so that as we go into more of the details later on in this season, that can give you some context of, where I'm coming from. So I had struggled with my weight, I would say, my entire life, or at least from what I could remember. When I was about 6 years old, I went to the doctor. I remember they said I needed to go on a diet. I needed to lose weight. And they gave me like a list of like foods that I shouldn't eat and foods that I should, or something like that. All I can remember mainly is that I didn't like the diet that they put me on, and that I always just kind of struggled with my weight. When I was a kid, I generally was kind of overweight, although there were times when I was a good weight. I was an active kid. I loved to play sports. I was a tomboy, I was always outside and playing, but generally speaking, I was overweight. And then as I went into, being a teenager, I struggled, I would say, more. I was probably more aware of my weight at that point. I was on diets all the time, tried every diet. I usually could lose the weight. I could stick to the diet in the short term, but in the long term, I always ended up regaining the weight. By the time I was like 17, I actually lost a good bit of weight. That was due to taking Metabolift, which has since been banned by the FDA. But I got down to a weight, that I was pretty comfortable at when I was 17. I went to college early. I ended up meeting my husband there in college. We got married. I was married when I was 19. And so he was in the Marine Corps. And when he went off on deployment, I started to struggle with my weight a little bit more. Again, it was just, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had these habits around food that caused me to gain weight. Once he got back from Iraq, we ended up starting to have kids. He got out of the military and we started having kids. And so my weight just continued to go up and up and up. So by the time 2014 rolled around, I had given birth 3 times, and I just really didn't lose any of the baby weight after the 3rd kid came along. And so in 2014, my youngest son, was almost 2 years old, and I got tagged in these photos on Facebook. And when I looked at them, I was mortified. And when I look back at those photos, I'm no longer mortified. I feel like I was being really hard on myself back in 2014, but I didn't recognize myself. And that was really the thing that upset me, was that I had kind of just stuck my head in the sand a little bit. And then when I saw these pictures, it was just a wake up call. And so that was my I've had enough moment. I was like, I've got to get the weight off. I can't continue on like this. And it was a very dark moment too. I mean, it was, I would say, maybe the low point of my life. I had some really dark thoughts, like my family would be better off without me, and that kind of a thing. And that scared me. And so that year I decided, I'm going to get this weight off. But the problem was, I didn't know really what to do. I really felt clueless in that moment. When I was looking at it, I thought, I don't get it. I don't feel like I really eat more than other people. I don't really understand why I have gained this weight, or why I can't seem to lose it, or why, I end up, sometimes losing weight and then regaining it. So that year, for the rest of that year, I wanted to lose weight, but I wanted to do it the right way. And I was kind of at a loss for how to do that, because I always gained the weight back, and it just felt really unfair. But it really kind of felt like a mystery. So I did a lot of research. I was like constantly reading about weight loss, and I didn't really want to read more weight loss books, because every time I had read a book, it was like some sort of diet book, and I would read it and it would always say something different than the last diet book I read, but it always seemed to make sense. And so that was one reason why I was just kind of fed up with diets in general by the time I was, in 2014. And really at that point, I was thoroughly convinced that I just had a bad metabolism. I was like, nothing else makes sense. I'm not eating that much more than everybody else. So it must just be that I've got this terrible metabolism problem, and that's the problem. So I researched a lot about metabolism, and I did a lot that year. And in a way, I did nothing at all that year. I was doing some stuff like taking pictures of myself every week from like several different angles, just because I didn't want to be surprised anymore about like where I was with my weight, like I was when I was tagged in those photos. And in 2014, I would do things like, I'm going to run 3 miles a day. And I'd do that for a while. And then I wouldn't anymore. And then I would say, well, I just need to eat less and move more. And it was, really vague stuff that I did. But I have no idea that year if I lost any weight, because I refused to get on the scale. I was so afraid of what number I would see that I was like, I'm just not ready to see that number. So I'm just going to do these things. And I kept hoping that I would just like crack the code and I would just lose the weight and I would never have to get on the scale again. But by the end of 2014, the beginning of 2015, I really couldn't tell a difference in what I looked like in pictures. I didn't really feel like I was losing any weight. And so I started going to the gym. And it was around that time, like late 2014, that I heard about intermittent fasting. So I started going to the gym, and I kind of started experimenting a little bit with intermittent fasting. And when I started going to the gym, I did one of the best things I have ever done in my life. And that was I got on the scale for the first time in years. And that was in February of 2015. And when I saw the number, I was shocked. I thought I was going to see, 185. That was kind of like the high number I thought I might see. I really kind of thought, it's probably like 170s, but maybe 185. And instead, it was 222 pounds. And that was another shock. But once I started weighing myself, I said, okay, I'm just going to weigh myself every day for the rest of my life, because I never want to be in this place again where I have no idea, where I'm at with my weight. And so I started doing that. And so I was weighing myself consistently. I was also going to the gym like every day. I was being very consistent with that. I was being very active. I was convinced that what I really need to do is like just burn off the pounds, like I was working out super hard. I was doing CrossFit type workouts every day, the workout of the day, pretty much that, maybe modified slightly based on my abilities. But that's what I was doing. I was working out really, really hard. And it was at that point where I was like, I got to figure out, like what to do on the eating side of the equation, because the burning it off really wasn't working. And so I started experimenting with, like intermittent fasting. I was doing that some. I was working my way up really slowly with that. Like I would just say, okay, I'm just going to push breakfast later. I'm not going to eat before I go to the gym. I'm just going to like kind of like push my breakfast later and later and later. And that's what I was doing. And in combination with that, I was like, okay, I can do my macros. And I was like trying to do macros because that was, I was lifting weights. So I was like, I've got to do this thing. And I mean, I still don't really quite understand the whole macro thing. Quite frankly, there's so many confusing aspects to that, to me. And, but I was doing that sometimes. Sometimes I was like, okay, I've got to do intermittent fasting, but I also really need to count my calories. So I was like weighing and measuring all of my food at one point. The thing I was doing a lot, though, was I was quitting. I was being really consistent with weighing myself and with going to the gym, but I was not being consistent at all with my eating. I didn't have like a set plan. I just kept experimenting with stuff, and I was in a really big hurry. I really wanted to lose the weight fast. I was working out really hard, and I was getting very impatient. And I'd actually lost about 20 pounds. I gotten really close to being under 200, and then I hurt myself doing a deadlift, and I couldn't lift anymore. I was really in a lot of pain. My back, there was something wrong with it. I didn't go to the doctor, but I knew I couldn't continue doing deadlifts, and I couldn't do squats. I mean, I was just in a lot of pain, and so the only thing that didn't hurt was to walk. So I was like, okay, well, I got to just be consistent with walking, basically. And it was at that point that my weight loss really plateaued. And I think that was because, I had been working out really hard, and that was helping. But also I was kind of despairing because I thought, oh no, I can't work out really hard anymore, and that means I'm going to gain weight. And so I was, again, not really doing anything consistently on the eating side. And I was just getting frustrated. And so I told myself, I've got to figure this out. I'm not going to quit, but I was just kind of like floundering. And by the end of that year, my weight had started to trend back up. So I was heading back up into, like 205, that area. I had gotten down to like right above 200, and then it was starting to go back up. And so that was really frustrating to me that it was starting to go back up. So I thought I've really got to figure out what to do. So in 2016, so it was the beginning of the year, and I told myself, like, I've got to figure this out. So I did a couple of for 2 days, I did like a low carb diet, or slow carb diet, sorry. And then for another couple of days, I did the Shangri-La diet, which if you've never heard of that one, you could look that one up. But I realized, like, after those 4 days, I was like, this is ridiculous. I have got to just figure out how to eat. I've got to figure out, like, I don't think a diet, this type of thing where I just say I can't have these certain types of food. Like, I don't think that's sustainable for me for the long term, because that's what I've always done. I've always done this thing where I get rid of certain foods, and then I lose the weight, and then I end up going back to eating those foods because I like those foods. I want to live my life and have those foods in it. And then I gain the weight back. So I got to figure this out. I got to learn how to eat the food and still, lose the weight and then keep it off. And so, in looking back, I thought, okay, this intermittent fasting thing, when I'm actually doing it, when I'm sticking with it, I am able to lose weight. It's just that the weight loss is really slow. When I look back, I could see when I'm being consistent with it, I'm losing about 1 pound a week. When I'm not being consistent with it, then I'm not losing any weight. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to pick that. That's the thing I'm picking. I'm picking intermittent fasting, and I'm going to do that, and we'll see what happens. In 2016, I just focused on consistency, and I made up my mind, okay, I'm going to do intermittent fasting 6 days a week. I'm going to take a cheat day on Sunday, and then I'm going to walk 6 miles every day. And that was my plan. I decided, as far as when I'm eating, I can eat whatever I want. Like, I'm not going to have any kind of rules about like low carb or anything like that. I'm just going to eat whatever foods my family is eating, whatever's in the house or whatever is set before me. If we're, at somebody else's house, that's what I'm going to eat. I have no rules about the actual foods. I just don't want to overeat, and I'm going to obey my eating window. And I told myself I could have coffee with half and half during the fasting window, because that would just make my life easier. And that was what I was going to try. I was just going to be consistent with that. And as it turns out, that helped me lose weight. Like, I was losing about 1 pound a week. So in 2015, that's when I was, learning how to do intermittent fasting. I really had gotten scared of doing anything longer than a 14-hour fast. I had read an article at one point that basically said women shouldn't fast longer than 14 hours. But in 2016, I said, I'm just going to figure out what window works best for me. And I'm going to, pay attention to how I feel and, make sure I don't have any negative symptoms. But by the beginning of 2016, I was like at a 16-8. So 16 hours of fasting, 8-hour eating window. And in 2016, I just, I kept making the eating window shorter. And there were a couple of things, a couple of reasons I did that. The main one was that I enjoyed having a shorter eating window because I started to see in my fasting window, I was getting so much done. I had so much more free time. I had time to do things that before I never felt like I had time to do, like sit down and read or, like go for a walk, things like that. I could use the fasting window for that. And then, the eating window, I could just eat during that time. Now, I also thought, okay, but if I have this shorter eating window, obviously, I'm going to lose weight a lot faster, but that's not what happened. I ended up going to OMAD, 1 meal a day, which is basically a 24-hour fast. I'm just fasting for basically 24 hours and eating for, a few minutes and then going back to fasting. But even that, I was losing about 1 pound a week. But I decided, I like this. I liked that rhythm of just eating 1 meal a day. And so by November of 2016, I had gotten down to about 157, 158 pounds, which was amazing to me. It was like I felt really good. One thing that I had decided for myself was that I was going to stop losing weight when I felt like I was at a good weight. So in other words, I kind of had in my mind where I wanted to be. I wasn't quite sure on the number. I thought, I think probably either 140s or 150s will probably be good, but I'm not really sure. Instead of being too focused on the number, I'm going to really focus on how do I feel? Am I at that point where I feel comfortable in my own skin or do I not? And so once I got down to like 157, 158, I felt like, yeah, I feel really good here. And plus, the holiday season was upon us. And I thought, this all feels so easy that, it almost felt too easy, quite frankly. And I thought, I don't know, like I've always gained the weight back. Like, I don't know, like, what will it be like to maintain this? How hard will it be? Or will it be easy? And what will my life need to look like in order to maintain it? So I said, okay, I'm going to see what I can do as far as just maintaining this. And then I'll, if I ever want to lose more, I'll lose more. But for right now, I just want to stick here. So from November of 2016 through September of 2017, so almost an entire year, I just maintained. And that year was pretty neat, for me, because it felt so easy to maintain my weight. I maintained in about a 5 or 6 pound range. And I really felt like this is so nice. This is easy. Like, I was really loosey-goosey. I was trying to see how much I could get away with. And I think that's human nature as far as, I just wanted to see like, well, do I need to do intermittent fasting every day? Or do I want to do intermittent fasting every day? Or what do I want to do? I experimented with everything. I experimented with like doing no intermittent fasting at all, or, not doing any step goal at all, just saying, like try to be more active, but, like not have a step goal. And what I found, I did learn several things during that first maintenance period. The first thing I learned was that, the step goal was good, that I needed to have that step goal in my life. Mainly though, for the emotional well-being, I felt much better and much less stressed when I had that step goal and stuck to it. So that was one thing I learned. Okay, I like having that step goal there. It's good for me. It's good for my attitude. And so that's really nice. As far as the intermittent fasting went, I realized, I do like doing intermittent fasting. And I also enjoyed the flexibility that I had of just, sometimes doing something like a 16-8, sometimes doing something like OMAD, sometimes doing nothing at all, just like I'm not going to fast at all today. And I found that I could maintain in that range really easily that way. I continued to weigh myself every day. That has been a thing that I continue to do to this day, is to weigh myself. But that was my maintenance period. I was like, this is pretty easy. And because I was able to maintain it, I decided, I want to tell other people about this, because I had done it in a way that I felt like I had not heard a lot of people say that they had done it this way. A lot of times when I would hear about intermittent fasting, it would also be in conjunction with, low carb or counting calories or keto. And it usually wasn't like eat whatever you want and do intermittent fasting. And so I uploaded my first videos to YouTube. Now, once I uploaded that first video to YouTube, I realized, I'm still technically overweight. And this was, this is a technicality because it was based on the BMI. So in other words, the body mass index basically takes your height and your weight and it comes up with a calculation. And so it says, in order to be, quote unquote, at a normal weight, you need to be in this range. And so for me, 155 and higher, that's technically overweight. And so I thought, well, I really should get those last few pounds off. And so I thought, well, okay, that could be a thing that I do on YouTube. I could, kind of go through that process of losing down a few more pounds and kind of show people how slow it is. And I did that. I did like this monthly checkup, basically, where I would say, like, okay, here were my results. Here's how much weight I lost. And so I did that. And I went from, like 158 down to 142. And it took me about a year to do that. And so it was about a third of a pound a week. And this was doing OMAD. I went back to just doing OMAD 6 days a week, cheat day on Sunday, and walking 6 miles every day. So with that kind of discipline, I was able to get from there, from 158 down to 142. And then I decided to maintain. So starting at the end of 2017 and on in 2018, that changed the dynamic on my weight loss journey, because what had been very private, I mean, I didn't even really talk to my husband and my kids about what I was doing. They didn't even really know. It's kind of funny because my husband would say to me after I started the YouTube channel, like he didn't even realize what I was doing when I was doing it, that I was really trying to like lose weight. And he hadn't really noticed, all this, which was really funny to me. But it did change the dynamic once I went on to YouTube and started talking about all this stuff. And then also losing weight, it made my journey public. And so 2018, that was the year of I was documenting all this on YouTube. Plus, in February of that year, we decided to go RVing. So we sold our house. We got on the road. It was like, I think about April when we actually got on the road. And so that changed the dynamic in a different way. So it had made it public. That was the first thing. But then also, once we got on the road and we were making these videos, we really didn't have a plan for our income. We had some skills that we knew that we could do remotely, things like web design and things like that. But we weren't quite sure how we were going to make it all work. We just knew that we would somehow make it work. And so as it turned out, my YouTube channel just kind of started gaining steam in right around Mother's Day of 2018. And so as it turned out, we started to get enough ad revenue coming in. And it was just kind of providing some income. And then I ended up writing the Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, that book, and I started marketing it to my audience, and that provided income too. So by the end of 2018, I decided, I don't want to lose any more weight. I had gotten down to like 142, and I just felt like I was chasing a lower number at that point. I really thought, when I was up at like 158, I thought, okay, well, it'll be like if I lose down to the 140s, that'll be a big difference too. But what I found was, to me, there was no difference. There was no difference between like 157 and down at 142. I didn't feel any differently about my body. I didn't feel I didn't even feel like, oh, I feel more energetic now. I didn't feel any of that. I didn't even feel like it was easier to get around and stuff. Whereas there was a major difference when I went from 222 down to 158, let's say. There was a big difference in how I felt. Like once I was down at that weight, I didn't like cry in the dressing room and things like that. Like I felt good when I went shopping. I felt good just moving around, getting around in my life. The day-to-dayness of life felt really good at 157, and it felt really good at 158, and it felt fine at 163, and it felt fine at 142. There was just really no difference. And I had to figure out for myself, like, well, then what does that mean for my maintenance? What do I want to maintain at? Because if you can't really tell a difference, then what is the right move? And so I told myself, I don't really know. I think I want to be in the 140s. And that's pretty much been the goal that I've had since then, is just to maintain in the 140s. And what I did find, because there were times when my weight would go up to the 150, 151, 152, I started to notice that as I got near 154, I started to clench, I didn't like that. And not because of how it made me feel as far as like physically, but just the technicality of it, the technicality of like being a few pounds overweight. If I went back up to 157, 158, I just thought, no, I don't want that technicality hanging over me. I feel better just having that be my line. Everybody needs that line, and that's my line. I wanted to be in the normal BMI. So by 2019, of course, my weight loss journey was very public at that point. And also my income was now tightly coupled to 6 Miles to Supper and to the weight loss journey. I had the book royalties and the AdSense from YouTube. And I also was offering courses and coaching and things like that. And I really started to struggle with that. It was both very good and also a negative. So the way it was a good thing was that I was getting some really humbling and heartwarming feedback about what I was doing. So that was really, really nice. And I love to help people, and I want to help people. But on the other hand, I felt like it was very dangerous for my weight to be so tightly coupled to my income source. For one, I felt like that could lead to some really unhealthy behaviors if, I started to gain weight or something like that. I didn't want my main motivation to be monetary. I wanted to be doing whatever I was doing because that was the right thing to do, not just because I was getting compensated in some way for it. And so by the end of that year, we had already decided we were, pretty much done with RVing. We were looking at getting off the road, moving back into a permanent home. And then by the beginning of 2020, of course, the world shut down, and that kind of made our decision for us a little bit more quickly. And so we moved back to Florida. We got into a permanent house. And then my husband went and started earning the income for our household so that I didn't have to have 6 Miles to Supper be the thing that was providing the income for us. And I think that has been the right choice, to make it so that it's not our main source of income. It has taken a lot of pressure off of my own weight loss journey. But the thing that has been really important to me this entire time when I've been doing these podcasts and making these videos is I want to be authentic. And I have always tried my best to live my life as if I had none of these things, as if I did not have a YouTube channel, no podcast, that I've never written a book about intermittent fasting, so that I'm not doing the thing just because I've made these videos and these podcasts and written these books. So once the income was decoupled from my weight loss, that was really helpful, because then I was able to see, like, okay, now that I'm not having to depend on this for my income, do I still want to do intermittent fasting? And the answer is yes. I love intermittent fasting. I continue to practice intermittent fasting, I would say, the vast majority of my days, even though right now I'm just trying to maintain. And my goal is to maintain in the 140s. And I've hit that goal for every year since 2018. Just to give you an example, last year, if you took all of my single day weights and you added them up and then divided them by the number of days in the year, you would get 149.22. So I was still in the 140s. And so that means that sometimes my 7-day average has been higher than that, and some days my 7-day average has been lower than that. Just to give you some more numbers, in 2022, for example, the highest my 7-day average ever went went was 152.49, and the lowest it was that year was 146.26. And like I said, I feel good there. In these several years of maintenance that I've been in, one thing that I've definitely learned about intermittent fasting, one thing I love about it is that it is so flexible that when your life changes, the great thing about intermittent fasting is it can change right along with it, and it can just fit so easily. And that's, of course, if you find that you enjoy intermittent fasting. Of course, if you hate intermittent fasting, it's not going to work for your life. So just, go find something else. For me, OMAD used to work great all the time. Like, my family wasn't even aware that I was doing this. Like, my kids were at younger ages, and so they were homeschooling just kind of on their own schedule, and they didn't really notice that I was eating one meal a day. My husband, he was, off working, so he wasn't noticing I was just eating one meal a day. But then as my kids got older, things changed. Like, when we were RVing, at one point we were doing exploration day. And so that was like during the week, we'd have a day where we'd just go explore an area. And so OMAD didn't work for me on that day. So I just had to figure out how to do that differently. Okay, that day I'm not going to do OMAD. Or maybe I'm not even going to do intermittent fasting that particular day. And then there have been other points in my life where things have gone so crazy, and it's just been there's so many stressful things happening all at once that I'll just say, I'm just doing OMAD for right now. I just need the simplification of doing OMAD, and I'll do 6 days a week of OMAD. And there have been other times though where I would do intermittent fasting, but it wouldn't be OMAD, and it would be, something more like a 16-8 or even like a 12-12, just because it was a certain type of situation where relationally it was more important to me that I shared these meals with various family members, because that was the best thing for my life at that point. And that's been the interesting thing to me about intermittent fasting, is that once you know how to do it, it's really easy to switch it around. Like, if you need to be doing, a shorter eating window for a while because of whatever reason, that's fine. And then sometimes you need to open it up a little bit more, have a long, or maybe even a really long eating window, and you can learn how to do that. And to me, it's been really easy to just switch back and forth as I need to. And that's been so different than my experience with any other kind of diet. There have been so many diets that I've tried that, even the ones that I've had success with, I never want to do again. They just leave a bad taste in my mouth because of, the complications, or the how time consuming it is to figure out, how many carbs does this have and how many grams of protein, and how to balance them all out and all this stuff. Whereas with intermittent fasting, it's just so simple to do. And it's easy to customize it to your life, whatever is going on at that point, to make it so that you can do a plan, or even a modified plan, and still have the results you're looking for. And so that brings us up to the present day. And again, my goal is to maintain in the 140s. I weigh every day. I generally practice intermittent fasting, some form of it, most days of the week. Generally speaking, I don't eat breakfast except for on Saturdays. My husband makes pancakes. But other than that, I generally don't find that I'm hungry for breakfast. I eat, usually if I'm going to have more of a window, I usually eat, my first meal around noon, or sometimes 2:00. And, I still do enjoy OMAD though a lot. Especially if I'm trying to consistently write, I find OMAD is really helpful with that. And I'm a wife and a mom, and I homeschool my 3 kids still, and I record podcast episodes and videos. And I also write for my website, 6milestosupper.com. So that's the long version of my weight loss journey with intermittent fasting. And like I said, in the upcoming episodes, we'll take deeper dives into certain aspects of intermittent fasting and how I practice it. But I hope that this episode was a helpful overview of kind of my philosophy with intermittent fasting and how it has looked in my life. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Do you want to lose the weight without getting rid of the foods you love, and that you'll go back to eating again anyway? My book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, teaches you how to practice intermittent fasting so that you lose the weight sustainably and keep it off for good. You can get the audiobook read by me for free when you sign up for your 30-day trial of Audible. The link is in the show notes. And if you've gotten value from this podcast and you'd like to let other people know about it, it would be great if you could leave a review on either iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks.